How many of you wish you had more breathing space in your day? Space between one urgent thing and the next. Space to be able to really sink into some of those key decisions. Maybe just space to be truly present to the person that you're talking to. After writing 3 books in 3 years, today's guest, Jodie Wilson, found herself at a level of burnout that she wanted to make sure didn't happen again. She wanted to continue writing, but was keen to explore how to do that in a way that wasn't going to cost her. As a health journalist, Jodie's latest book, which is titled The Brain That Breathes, and I love this tagline, which is Essential Habits for an Overwhelming World. This book explores ways that we can carve out more breathing space for our brains, the way that they have evolved and created. And when we do, we actually can tap into more creativity. In this conversation, we explore some of these tools that Jodie has researched and absolutely now puts into place. I found out that the guy who invented the infinite scroll wished he never had. And we talk about how the industry around self-care is really tailored to sell to us. And maybe that just going out for a walk could be the very best thing that we could do. So if you've ever found yourself muttering, it's just all too much, then this conversation and Jodie's book might be for you. Please enjoy the insights and the invitations from the health journalist, Jodie Wilson. Hey, real quick, before we dive into today's conversation, if you're a leader or a manager, then I want to tell you about pragmatic thinking. We help people like you doing the hard work of building better cultures, stronger teams, and more confident leaders. How do we do it? Well, we do it using the latest in psychology and behavioural science, combining with nearly 3 decades of experience. So visit pragmaticthinking.com or find the link in the show notes below to find out more. Now, on to today's chat. Jodie, welcome to this podcast. I'm really fascinated to dive into this conversation with you.
Thanks for having me, Alison.
Look, as a health journalist, I understand that you wrote 3 books in 3 years and then made the decision to go, any future book, I want to do this differently. In some regards, that getting through that volume of books and publishing those can feel like a success, but something in you wanted to do things differently. Can you talk to me a little bit about what that was?
Yeah, I suppose I was backpedaling from burnout, and I also knew that I wanted to keep writing books. And that's an interesting concept in itself in Australia, because most writers don't make a lot of money from books. I think the average income for an Australian author from their books is well below the poverty line. And I'm really no different to that. But I want to be a writer in Australia, and I want to continue doing that. And I also want to feel well while doing that. And I knew that I couldn't keep going if I was pushing myself to burnout with every book. The 3rd book I wrote was all about postpartum. And when I started it, I thought I was writing a book about life after birth. And what I was actually writing about is the social discourse around mothers and feminism. And I just had to be so vigilant with the research and how I was writing and the judgment that could very well land on the page, but I really didn't want it to. So it felt like a massive responsibility writing that book. And I can see in retrospect that I really did take on that responsibility emotionally. And so that was part of the reason why I was feeling that burnout. But I was also interested in my brain, and I was interested in what it really needs to keep coming up with bright ideas and to keep being curious. And at the same time, kind of we're in this environment at the moment where AI is threatening our words. And so I just decided to look at the biology. And as I was doing that, I was well aware that so many people around me, especially the women around me, were all navigating a very real sense of overwhelm in daily life. And everyday life was kind of being described as a lot and like, oh, it's just too much. That was the language I was hearing. So I looked at the science because I really do believe that we've stepped too far away from our basic biology and that we can understand so much about ourselves when we look at our biology. And I was looking in particular at the brain, and it didn't take me long at all to realize that the life our brain was designed for is vastly different to our normal everyday reality now. And it's that widening gap that's actually informing so much of our exhaustion and overwhelm and burnout. And so I started looking at the remedy. And the remedy is actually breathing space. So I define that as small moments of downtime often. It looks like nothing, but it's actually really something. It's the proven antidote to stress. And I started implementing it in my life as soon as I kind of stumbled across the research and the findings. And it made a massive difference to my life, and it made a huge difference to my creativity and my ability to write books. And now I'm a different person because of it. And yeah, it became a book that has become a bestseller. And you know, I've had such a variety of people reach out to me. A 50-year-old policeman who said he's always been challenged by mental health issues, but he's never quite understood his brain like he does now after reading my book. A lot of young mothers who are navigating postpartum and early motherhood in a world that, you know, doesn't respect or revere or support them. Teachers, psychologists, social workers, you know, every facet of professionalism in our society is in some way navigating a very real burnout, or at least some semblance of burnout. You know, we are in an epidemic of it. So I just wanted to kind of bring the biology to the page in a really accessible manner and hopefully help people, because it really helped me.
Certainly the feedback that you're describing, it's absolutely the breadth and depth of not only the research, but the accessibility of the tools that you walk through and share. I can imagine is incredibly powerful and amazing for you, no doubt, to be starting to get some of that feedback.
Yeah.
From what you've just spoken about, there's a bunch of things that really kind of come to mind where you kind of even described that previous book. They're big topics, right, to, as you say, not take ownership on, but explore, to dive into, to want to be able to get into conversation around. And that creatively, as well as no doubt from your journalism background, is really wanting to bring these conversations to the forefront. And then the impact of our own kind of well-being, what kind of impact on that can be true for many of us who, you know, might want to live really big and important lives and dive into things that are meaningful and worthwhile, but they can come with a cost. What was it in particular about why the brain? And I know that might sound like a super obvious question to go, well, of course, that's where it all kind of starts from. But there can be a number of different access points to people feeling overwhelmed, feeling kind of that sense of burnout. What was it about the brain that fascinated you and that opportunity to start creating a bit of a breathing space for our brain?
I think it was because I really knew that feeling of decision fatigue and mental fog and the pushing through to try and be productive and efficient and it not working. And I think we all know that feeling. And I also knew and understood the relief of clarity. And that was really something I wanted to understand a little bit better in order to get there, to get there on a daily basis, to have that clarity as kind of a foundation for creativity. And that disconnect was really fascinating to me. And I suppose what was really interesting is that 15 years ago, sometime maybe even 10 years ago, we had those periods of downtime in our day. Yeah, those kind of mellow states of pottering and pondering and wandering and just kind of standing in line at the coffee shop observing. And we don't have those mellow moments anymore because we have our phone. And what happened in those mellow moments, and what can still happen if we're aware of it, is that our brain does the really good work of decluttering. So the brain is a magnet for clutter. It's a bit like the kitchen bench, like it just will soak in everything. So we have this scarcity mindset. Our brain is an organ of instinct, not logic. So it thinks, I better get this now because it might not be there later. And that served us really well 10,000 years ago when, food was scarce and shelter wasn't guaranteed. It meant we were looking for those things for our survival. And now in this age of abundance, there's this word in the zeitgeist, infobesity. So we're kind of gorging on information and entertainment, and we can pick up our phone and within minutes we are privy to what people are wearing, what they're buying, this overconsumption, information, entertainment, videos, opinions, rhetorics, news stories, like it is coming at us. And what we don't understand is that our brain is soaking in every single thing. So when we don't do the good work of decluttering, that's when we end up with that overwhelm, that exhaustion, that decision fatigue, and that burnout. Why isn't anyone talking about this? Because when we rest and do less, no one's making any money out of that. Yeah. You can't monetize these things. You can't monetize the mellow state of walking, around your neighborhood without your headphones in, which is actually really good. And podcast hosts hate it when I talk about this, but I'll keep talking about it.
No, I'm happy for you to talk about it.
Yeah,
it's important to
we really need to think about the fact that if we are consuming so much information and entertainment every single day, we also need to do the really good work of actively decluttering the brain.
It feels like such a conscious rock to move out of the way, and for us to, it's not even just permission, but it's actually going, I need to think about. One of the things that blew me away in your book that you make reference to, I think it's Azar Raskin who invented the infinite scroll, and even he regretted having done that, which makes me go, I wonder where we would be if that didn't exist. Now, it might have been that someone else invented it at some point, but that cognitive load of, as you say, going for a walk without anything, what is it that gets in the way? As you say, is it just that every marketing tool tells us that, that message doesn't get pushed? What did you discover as to what might be getting in the way?
Yeah, so that infinite scroll is called the ludic loop, but it means that as soon as we start scrolling on our phones, we enter this repeated cycle of anticipation, uncertainty, and just enough feedback to keep us there. So it's very addictive. And I think what's most important to know and understand is that the people that have created, all of the technology know our brains. They've engineered this technology because they understand our brains. And so we can take a little bit of that power back, I think, when we understand our biology as well. And so I think we are also living in an extreme optimization culture where every minute counts and we're always, chasing the next big thing and looking at what comes next. And so when we do go for a walk, we're thinking, well, I could actually use this time. I could really habit stack here. And I could be listening to a podcast and learning something while I'm exercising. Or while the kettle boils in the morning, I'll do 20 squats. Yeah, you're probably more, going to benefit more if you just kind of stare out the window and let your gaze wander. That's going to be really good for your brain. But this optimization culture is actually really interesting. And I'm looking at it a little bit deeper for the next book that I'm working on at the moment. But I think it's particularly relevant to the younger generations because when they can't see a future in terms of being able to afford a house, they turn to themselves as their most optimizable project. And so we're inundated with fitness hacks and with biological clock metrics and all of that stuff. And people want to be the best. It's feeding this sense of, I want to be better than. And that's what our whole self-care industry is about now. It's not about care, it's about improvement. And it's a multi-trillion-dollar global industry. And I really recoil from the term self-care, because when we think about self-care, when we think, we're kind of at the end of our tether and we need some self-care is the first thought. It's a completely capitalist message, because we think, oh, I'll book an appointment for a massage, but then you have to work to pay for that massage, and you might have to organise babysitting for your kids, and you have to drive to that massage. And there's a lot of kind of executive functioning involved in that self-care of choice, when really you could just lie with your legs up the wall for 10 minutes.
Do we need a different name? Do we need to call it something else?
I call it basic human care or meaningful care, but it's care that your brain and your nervous system responds positively to. And I think that whole concept of the optimization culture and improving yourself is actually feeding something much deeper, which is I'm not enough as I am. And that's soul-crushing and incredibly devastating for a lot of people. But it's also a reality for a lot of people, and it's the foundation of a lot of anxiety and stress. And so that idea of taking care of ourselves as we are right now today, and I do say in the book that, this isn't about making plans for the next week or the next month. I don't want you to even think about tomorrow. I just want you to think about subtraction mostly. What can you take away today to create a bit of breathing space for yourself? And what can you do in that breathing space? And that might be 1 minute of inhaling deeply through your nose and then sighing, because we know that sighing is incredibly good for your whole body, and your brain will dictate a sigh when you're holding too much tension. It might be 5 minutes of just lying down on your bed when you're really tired. So instead of pushing through that tiredness, you recognize that tiredness and you give yourself 5 minutes of rest.
That permission for breathing space right now, as you say, not even optimizing for tomorrow or next week. That, and in your book you use the language of that's sometimes the most radical act that we can step into. As you started to dive into the research and you said you were putting some of these tools into place yourself, what were you noticing? What was your brain starting to do? Was there moments where you kind of went, this is actually making a difference?
Yeah, my brain was just so much quieter. And the first thing I did was I took out the headphones when I was walking. And so for 2 years now, I've risen early in the morning. I've got 4 kids, so there was a season there where I used to think about how nice it would be to walk in the morning unencumbered. And now I'm in that season. So if you're listening and you've got young kids, this isn't the time for you, but it will come. So I'm kind of up every morning at about 5:30, and I live in a small town in Tasmania, and I walk the dog along the beach and through the back streets of town without headphones. I don't carry my phone with me. And it's basically how I start the day with space. And it's changed how I work, and it's changed my mood, and it's changed my energy. I just realized that I was filling my brain at every opportunity. And what I actually needed to do was just to listen to the world instead of listening to whatever voice was coming through the headphones. And it's really interesting because on that walk, sometimes it will take me 10 minutes to kind of sort through my thoughts and feel kind of quite grounded in my body. And sometimes it will take the whole walk for me to feel like that, that 45 minutes. So that's really interesting. Creatively, it's also incredibly beneficial. And a lot of writers talk about the benefits of walking. But I had a moment, I'm actually working on a novel at the moment as well as a nonfiction book. And I was walking a few weeks ago and it was still dark outside. There was a lot of stars in the sky. And this plot realization came to me. And I got full body goosebumps and just started crying on the spot because it was just such a pivotal moment for me as a writer to understand this about the plot and the characters. And I think it's for all those reasons that we write. I mean, it's why we write, to get those moments, which are very few and far between. But if I had have had something in my ears then, I would not have had that realization of that.
I'm
I'm quite
almost
certain.
feeling goosebumps just hearing you share that experience. There's a physiology of being truly immersed in and experiencing all of it, not being distracted by a phone or music or podcast.
Yeah.
That's
And
powerful.
we need that space. You know, I spoke to a psychologist, a Vic Basu, and he explained to me that there's this beautiful continuum of our awareness and attention, and it starts with boredom. Yeah. And then we get curious about something, and then we get creative, and then we reach clarity. And it doesn't always occur in that sequence. We could be bored first and then get creative and then get curious and then find clarity. But again, coming back to those mellow states that modern life has effectively eradicated, when we don't have those mellow states, those kind of fallow moments, and we're in winter now, like it is a fallow season. And we are nature. So our body and brain is responding to the season just like the trees are. So if we look at the trees, they've shed all the leaves, they've let go of what isn't necessary, and they're kind of bunkering down a bit. And effectively, we should be doing that too. And for anyone listening that's kind of in winter and noticing that their body's moving a bit slower, that they're not thinking as clearly, they need a bit more sleep. Yes, lean into all of those things, because it means that you're going to be more productive and more efficient in spring, just like the trees will be. We can't deny the fact that we are nature. And for some, that may sound really woo-woo, but it's actually biological fact. And when we lean into that concept and accept it, we can really benefit from it. And for women especially, you know, the whole world is kind of based on a 24-hour male hormonal cycle, which expects quite consistent productivity. And yet we are on monthly cycles. And there will be times in your month where you aren't as productive and you can't think as clearly. And I do discuss that in the book as well, because I feel like it's the very basis of sex education that millennials never got in school, but thankfully younger generations are starting to hear it, which I think is revolutionary.
It's absolutely revolutionary. I actually really love that chapter, and even that question of what season are you in, and the multi-layer of that, as you say, across a day, a week, month, calendar year, but also the season of your life, which allows us to drop any of those comparisons maybe of what others are doing, or I need to be as productive as them. We don't know what season they might be in, what's going on for them.
Yeah, that idea of life seasons. And you know, you might be in postpartum, or you might be in perimenopause. Perhaps you're in a period of grief and loss, or you may be recovering from an operation in a season of convalescence. Perhaps you're in a season of divorce, or you're in the sandwich generation, so you're looking after your children and your parents. These life seasons dictate so much about our capacity and our energy and what we can actually achieve in a day. And those limitations can feel restrictive, but I think they can also be a really beautiful permission.
Absolutely, because I think fighting against them is draining. That's also those elements of draining. There can be a sense that not only crafting breathing space, but rest is something that we earn after we've achieved. We've worked hard, we've had a big week, then I've earned my glass of wine. I've earned my time to binge on the couch, or what we might see as rest. And you talk definitely about unpacking different types of rest. But this almost unwritten rule that you've got to earn your rest, or the fear that if I rest, maybe I won't want to get up again. Maybe I'll just want to stay here too long and become lazy. How do we counter some of those narratives or stories that our brains might throw at us because of the social conditioning that's around this sense of rest?
It's not an unwritten narrative, it's just late-stage capitalism, really. And when you see it as that, I think you're kind of much more aware of the fact that there's a lot of people benefiting off the fact that we think we need to be consistently productive. And that's particularly relevant to women. So the unpaid care industry is worth more than 3 mining sectors. So when we are striving to do it all and striving to do it well, we are burning out. And a lot of people at the top are like benefiting immensely. So if we are really intent on looking after ourselves in a meaningful way, in a way that our brain and our nervous system responds positively to, and this is going to become more relevant in an AI-driven world. And I think as parents as well, it's a big part of parenting that we're not talking about, which is teaching our children how to be human. We can acknowledge that rest is actually vital and rest is actually productive. So when we do rest, we are making sure that we can be productive and efficient, creative humans the next day. It's not laziness at all. It's actually awareness and it's respect.
Again, that radical act of being aware enough to be able to tune in. Talk to me about the different types of rest, because sometimes we can think sitting on the couch and binge watching the latest TV series is a moment of rest. What did you discover in your research about?
Rest is subjective. So what's restful for me may not be restful for you. And so you kind of have to explore it a bit. And I think it really starts with self-awareness. So like just being aware of your body, like, oh, I'm tired. So I've got 2 choices here. I can push through this tiredness, or I can take just a few minutes to lie on the bed with my eyes closed and take some deep breaths. And the body and nervous system responds really well to those consistently small moments of downtime. So your nervous system is going to, I like to think that there's a nice bridge between your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So if you want to go from a stress state to a state of ease, then you would be doing that deep breathing or that resting in small moments throughout your day, but your body is going to respond more quickly to that the more often you do it. It's a bit like muscle memory, and that's just activating the vagus nerve, which I do discuss in the book. But it really is about, I think for so many women especially, it's about giving yourself permission. And for mothers of young children, it's literally about leaving the mess and going outside with your cup of coffee in the morning and just sitting in the garden and looking at the sky and ignoring the mess and giving yourself that time. It's also about really acknowledging the power of sleep. And I think we can all, I mean, there's so much talk now about, optimal sleep, again, that optimization culture. But I think we really need to bring back settling for sleep. Yeah, so many of us are on screens and then we turn the screen off and we turn the light off and we expect to fall asleep. And that just doesn't happen like that. And yet we are militant with bedtime routines for our children. And yet we grow up and we're like, oh, well, I don't need the dim lights or the hot baths or the nice warm drink or the story time. And actually we need all of those things. And I've always been passionate about settling myself asleep, but now that I understand the physical, mental and emotional benefits of that, it's probably my favourite part of the day.
I'm right there with you, Jodie. I love bed. It's my favourite part of the day. I'm in the season with 18 and 16-year-olds, so teenagers. So my 16-year-old the other night just nearly rolled her eyes when I came in at 7:30 saying, I'm going to go to bed. She's like, Mum, what?
I know.
But it is just so delicious to give that permission. Yeah.
It really is. And I think, my children are aged 9 to 19. And so, I'm definitely out of that early motherhood stage. But I just, I've got this magnesium hot chocolate that I buy now, which is so bougie. And if interest rates keep going up, it'll have to go.
Just have half a teaspoon, still have it, just cut it down.
Or the, sleepy time tea and the washing of the face. And then, I'm a writer, I'm a prolific reader. I've always got multiple books going at the same time, but getting into bed with that book. And I think because I rise early as well, that early bedtime it suits my body, and my brain. So I'm a big advocate for really settling yourself to sleep, and do not take your phone into your bedroom. I plug it in the kitchen overnight. I really separate myself from it, because even when we're not on our phone, if we can see it, if it's near us, part of our attention is resting on it.
It's been a game changer for me. I will never go back.
No.
Yeah, and it makes such a fundamental difference to be able to close the page on the day and get ready for the next day. So it's certainly something I know I prioritise in amongst a busy day. I love the terminology where you share about finding the gaps. What are some examples of gaps where someone who might feel like they literally are running from one thing to the next and the only time they pause is just after dinner? What are some examples of where we can find those gaps?
I think instead of running from one thing to the other, you could just walk from one thing to the other. So like literally and very consciously slowing your body down. I also think that there's always going to be gaps in the day. So if you're in the bathroom and you run cold water over your hands for 30 seconds, that's one way to activate your vagus nerve. So you're going to go from that state of stress and activate the vagus nerve, so you kind of move into that more easeful state. Instead of going from your laptop to your phone, go from your laptop and then let your gaze take a panoramic view. So you're looking out to the horizon or up at the sky. And when your gaze and your focus does that, it's telling your nervous system that you're safe. When you get into the car, you don't necessarily have to have music playing or a podcast on. You can just drive in silence. And I think sometimes if you have the option to go to an exercise class in a gym, or the option to walk in nature, sometimes that walk in nature is actually going to be more beneficial for you, depending on how you're feeling. There's all these little gaps, and sometimes we actually have to create the gaps. We have to subtract something. And I love what Elizabeth Strout, the author, says about the pragmatic helpfulness of white space on the page. So if you look at your diary and it's just absolutely full, and you are looking at your week with this sense of dread, I'm pretty sure that you could remove one thing, and instead of filling that space, you could just be in it.
There's a curiosity and a creativity that almost comes with searching for the gaps. So that I love that you kind of pull towards that. There's also a term that you write about in this book, which I hadn't heard before, but I really connected to it, and it's called the soft fascination. Can you talk to me a little bit about what that is?
When I first heard about soft fascination, I was like, it was another one of those kind of moments where I knew that it had to be the essence of the book, because it is so charming. And as writers, we're always looking for the heat in the narrative. That's a phrase that Jonathan Franzen, the author, kind of talks about in his novel writing, like follow the heat. And I knew as soon as I'd come across soft fascination that was the heat in the book that I needed to kind of follow and really kind of bring to the forefront of the book. But basically, when we're on a screen, our awareness is in hard fascination mode. So it's a bit like sirens in the street. We can't look away. And yet when we go into a green space, so a city park or the garden or the beach, our awareness is kind of lightly focused, and it's called mindfulness without the meditation. So our awareness moves from the sky to the cloud, to the tree, to the leaf, to the petal, as we're walking or when we're sitting. And it's kind of this gentle pondering. And as that happens, our brain can take a backseat, and it does the really good, important work of sorting and clearing. And then we come back to what we were working on beforehand, or we come back inside the house and we just feel a bit mentally lighter. And that's because we actually have a bit more space in our brain. And so there's studies have been done that 3 times of 20 minutes of breathing space throughout the week is really beneficial. But the caveat is you cannot have your phone with you. So no phone. I do it every day.
What do you mean, Jodi? I don't understand what you're saying.
I'm saying leave your phone at home. It'll be okay. But I know people in my publishing, my publishing house in Sydney, you know, parts of the team there's a park near their office. So they go and spend 10 minutes and they sit on a bench in the park and they just let their mind and gaze wander. And then they come back inside. And having that knowledge, you know, of soft fascination, like a daily dose of soft fascination is actually incredibly beneficial for you and your brain.
There's something about the terminology that really, that word fascination, that I love as well. Again, it doesn't feel like, there might be times where we've been told to do less, sit and rest, which we've talked about, but there's something about that soft fascination that what you're describing, what came to mind for me was doing nothing is not nothing. That's where our brain is sorting, shuffling, organising, tapping into different sides of thinking. So changing the sense that if I'm doing nothing, then I'm not worthy. It's actually not nothing. It's so important. It's that
fallow space where ideas come. And, you know, soft fascination can also happen in the shower when you're just standing there and watching the water droplets run down the tiles. It happens when we're using our hands. So like when we're washing the dishes, that doesn't require any thought, or folding washing. And yet mostly when we're washing the dishes or folding the washing, we've got headphones in. So we're losing that opportunity to be softly fascinated into that kind of fallow space where our brain can make some space. And when the brain does make space, it means bright ideas can bubble up from the subconscious.
Did you come across anything? Because one of the things that can happen is if we're washing dishes or folding, our brain is running through the day and everything that we failed to do, every comment that we forgot to say, maybe that argument, we're running through that again, how we might deal with some of that, what I might term overthinking that can happen in those moments?
Yeah, there's a beautiful concept in yoga, and I spent a bit of time studying and living at an ashram about 20 years ago, and it's called karma yoga, or yoga in action. And I remember for half an hour every day while I was there, we had to do work because, you know, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. There is always the mundane chores of life, no matter where we live or who we are. And the Swami, I was sweeping the path, and the Swami said to me, she could obviously see that my thoughts were elsewhere. And she said, I want you to repeat, I'm sweeping the path. And it's such a simple technique, but it really just brings you into the moment. Like, I'm folding the washing. I'm folding the washing. It's just this is just what's happening now. And I suppose we can do that in so many aspects of our day. And it's how we can be a little bit more present and a little bit more grounded. And so when all of our awareness is on kind of, I suppose, running through the day and criticizing ourselves, we can instead give ourselves the grace and the space to go, actually, this is just what I'm doing now.
It's where my feet are planted, where my hands are actively engaged. Yeah, it's a great reminder to come back to just pausing that overthinking that can happen. One of the other bits of terminology that I loved in your book, because I think there was a way that you've expanded it beyond what I had thought about it previously, and that's that sense of enoughness. I've definitely come across that belief, or moving into, rather than that belief that we're not good enough, that we have to prove and do more, but almost that coming back to that narrative that I'm enough with who I am. But you extended this sense of enoughness to what we have in our life, what we're putting into our calendars. Talk to me a little bit about, you know, what you learnt in diving into the research around this sense of enoughness.
I don't think it's far-fetched to say that right now we can make a choice about practicing enoughness, but soon I think it's going to be a necessity for most of us. So last night I interviewed a professor from the UK about the universal basic income, which is the concept that there obviously is a level of enoughness in terms of income for all of us. It kind of threads into ideas about sufficiency and about taking what we need and leaving the rest. And so it is a needs-based concept, and yet we live in a wants-based world. I spoke to an architect, a building designer here in Tasmania, And she really uses that concept as an ethos for her business, because Australians are living in the biggest houses in the world and we love to renovate. And a lot of the time we're doing that is purely from want and not from need. And I live in a 70-year-old house. And at one stage there were 6 of us living here with 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. And it was enough. And I have to constantly come back to that in my own life as I kind of really explore that gap between gratitude for what I have and the yearning and longing for more, because that's the world we're living in. I choose to live really frugally because I don't want to contribute to too much excess in the world. And, just today I got another marketing email from a brand that wanted to send me products. And I replied once again with I don't collaborate with brands for product or for payment. I don't want to contribute to excess in the world. And I have quite a big Instagram following. I've got a really big Substack following. I could be making thousands of dollars a month off that. And that would be quite life-changing for me, because as a writer, my income is notoriously uncertain and on the lower side. But I ethically can't do it. I just don't want to do it. And so I've reached that point of understanding in myself, but I want to go a little bit deeper into exploring what enoughness looks like in 2026. And that it just seemed like the most obvious next step to exploring this. And, my brand name is essentially Practicing Simplicity. That was the title of my first book, because simplicity was so big 10 years ago, but it was very much based on aesthetics, so linen curtains and minimalist interiors. And I see it more as a practice. There's no end goal. Yeah. And I think enoughness is the same. It's a lens for our decision making. So we're asking, what's enough for me right now? And that can be like, what's enough clothing for me right now? But it can also be, what's enough obligation for me right now? Like, is that too much in my diary? Do I need to subtract something to feel good, to feel well?
The power of for me right now is what's so powerful in that question, because I think that question of what's enough, it's like, when I get the next promotion, when I buy the next suit or outfit, but the what's enough for me right now also puts it into this point of time, knowing different seasons will come, different things will come. And even as you're talking, I remember it must have been, I feel like 2 years ago, I listened to a podcast with Derek Shivers, and there was a statement that he said that haunted me at the time, and it still comes up. And it was as simple as, what you own owns you. It requires admin. You have to do something with it. You're either keeping it, you're storing it, you're maintaining it, you're dusting it, or you're going to find somewhere to move it on, which is almost that similar to what you're saying, but it's the weight of having more. Where does that consume our time, our paperwork, our admin? That question that you pose of what's enough for me right now could be, really, really powerful. Do you find you have people push back on you, sort of saying, look, this is enough for me right now, I don't need that? Do you find that people push back on that, or that you challenge that, or has that not been the case for you?
People don't push back on it, but I am well aware that I have so many friends and acquaintances that do work with brands online and that support their families through that. And it's a really nuanced conversation, and I don't pretend at all to judge them. But I think I'm also, at the heart, I'm a writer, and I want to just keep writing books. And so the success for me of A Brain That Breathes is the fact that I got another contract, a book contract out of it, so I can keep writing. And, success, our whole world defines success by achievement and productivity. And I think we have to kind of really think a little bit deeper about what success means for us individually. In terms of pushback, I think a lot of people are starting to question how realistic it is to keep striving and to keep wanting more. And I think that's becoming particularly pertinent now that we're in industries or we have incomes that are quite precarious. Like, economic precarity is becoming more and more common for the middle class, and the cost of groceries is skyrocketing, and housing instability is becoming the norm. And so we're at this stage of life where there's quite a few crises, and we're in the middle kind of navigating quite a lot of uncertainty, perhaps more uncertainty than we ever have. And I think this year has been a prime example of that. And the subtitle of the book is Essential Habits for an Overwhelming World. And I apologize for getting that so correct, that overwhelming world part. But I think I do believe, and I don't think that I have all the answers or that I particularly am completely clued up in geopolitics, but I believe that intuitively we're at a bit of a turning point where we are going to have to think about these things more deeply. And for some people, they'll be thinking about it for the first time.
So where do they start, Jodie, if they're thinking about it for the first time? This is kind of economic reality. This is all well and good, but I have to work. It's not just about achievement. It's about survival. It's about the cost that my mortgage has gone up in the last 2 or 3 years. And so where I had maybe a bit of financial space or space, I don't have that anymore. Someone's listening to this. Where's the invitation to start?
I think the invitation to start is actually just taking care of yourself in those really accessible ways I outline in the book. And that's recognizing that your body and brain need some downtime. And I honestly believe that creating that breathing space in your day is the first step to being able to navigate bigger decisions and bigger, more complex concerns that we all have.
Those creating that breathing space, we've talked about sleep, we've talked about even walking, finding the little gaps, and then allows our brains to get creative with the solutions that are relevant for us in our life, not the solutions that work for other people. So that's where we can have a really strong sense of control. And there's so much in this book that is practical, and it feels really accessible. That, again, permission to, I've written down here, walking, just the power of walking. It doesn't have to be at a pace. You don't even have to have your Garmin or anything like that on, but that ability just to be able to get out and move and allow our brain that breathing space. I loved it where you talked about reading and some of the research around reading as well. What did you discover around what reading can do for our nervous system?
So there's been, out of the Queen's Reading Room in London, they engaged a team of neuroscientists to look at the benefits of reading. So if we read for 5 minutes in the morning, our focus and attention improves for the rest of the day. When we read for 6 minutes in the afternoon and evening, our heart rate and breathing rate slows down, and it's actually more relaxing than drinking a cup of tea or going for a walk. And it's why when people say, they're in bed and they're like, I can hardly finish a page before I'm asleep, I'm like, well, there you go. But reading also makes us more empathetic. It increases our empathy, particularly when we're reading novels, because we're in the mind of someone very different to us. And so we have a better understanding of ourselves and each other. So we all need to be reading more. I'm a big advocate for reading. I'm a massive advocate for libraries. They are vital third spaces in our communities, and they're only going to become more so. But our reading rates are in severe decline. We are not reading nearly as much as we need to. And again, coming back to that idea of parenting and teaching our children how to be human, children learn by observing and not so much by being told. So when they see their parent resting when they're tired, and when they see a parent settling themselves for sleep, and when they see a parent going out for a walk because the parent has said they're stressed and anxious and they need to relieve a bit of tension in their limbs, or when they see the parent carrying a book with them whenever they go out for the day, or reading in the evening instead of watching TV, they're all really good, beautiful, lifelong lessons for how we can be well humans in the world.
It serves us, but it serves those people around us, that permission as well. This book has been out, and we've talked about just, how practical and accessible it is and how important it is in this overwhelming world that we are in as we're navigating a whole range of levels of uncertainty. Given the book's been out for a while, what's been some of the feedback that you've received that's really surprised you?
You write a book and you just never know how it's going to be received. And so that's quite a vulnerable process. But I've just been inundated with the most beautiful messages. And I'm so incredibly grateful for them. And it's just so heartwarming, really, to reach so many different people. There was an 80-year-old man called Tim who came to one of my Sydney events, and he'd heard me on ABC Nightlife talking about the book. And he was so generous with his advice. And then I've had messages from mums deep in early motherhood, that really hard, relentless work of early motherhood that have said that they've kind of learnt so much about themselves and they're giving themselves so much more grace in that season. Teachers and social workers and psychologists and occupational therapists who are taking what they've learnt from the book and applying it to their students and their patients. So those simple biological care mechanisms that I talk about in the book are now being shared by healthcare workers. I had a message from someone who is a widow and was in a grief circle with other widows, and she said that a woman said she hadn't read a book in 10 years, but she finished A Brain That Breathes, and it's really helped her in her grief. You can't ever predict or plan to get responses like that. And it's, there's some people on Goodreads that have also said the complete opposite and called me self-indulgent, and that's fine as well.
That's fine.
There's always going to be the negative, but no amount of negative comments can erase the beautiful, generous thanks that I've received. And I'm so grateful. And I'm grateful that I've had readers now. I've been writing online since I became a mum in 2007. So what's that? Almost 20 years. And I've had readers that have stayed with me that whole time. And I actually met some of them on my book tour.
Oh, wow.
And it is such a privilege to have people in this day and age when there is so much material vying for your attention, to have someone read your words for that long and to invest their money in your book. I've also got a newsletter subscription service, and that's been life-changing for me from an income perspective, because people, pay to subscribe to my newsletter and get that weekly newsletter and, tell me it's been the best thing they've done for their mental health. I'm not a health professional, but I do, as a journalist, want to better understand my body and my brain so that I can, I suppose, understand myself a bit more in the world we're living in. And I just want to pass that information on in a really warm and kind and accessible way, because I think a lot of people are dealing with a lot of stuff. And I never, ever, ever want someone to come to my work and think that I know better than them or that I feel that they need to improve themselves. I just want them to really get to know themselves.
The invitation into the conversation, I think, is certainly what I took away from this book. And even from this conversation, I keep smiling to myself even as you're talking, because I can feel myself breathing deeper just by virtue of being in this conversation, being able to push back on some of the commercial beast that is out there, that often tells us that we need more and to be doing more, when actually that permission to do something different is really valuable. Jodi, I so appreciate your time. We will provide all the links to your newsletter for people to be able to follow you, and certainly for around your book, and look forward to the next book. The research sounds really fascinating around that as well. The name of this podcast is called Standout Life. When you hear that term, what does it mean to you to live a standout life?
I think it means to stand grounded on the earth beneath your feet.
I will join you in that. I think that's really, really powerful. Thanks so much, Jodi. I've loved this conversation.
Thanks, Ali.
Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked what you heard in today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe and also share this with someone who might also get value out of this episode. It's what helps us to continue to bring these incredible conversations. And if you want to be a better leader at work or in your business, then I want to tell you about pragmatic thinking. We help people just like you build stronger teams, healthier cultures, and true leadership confidence. We do it with a background in psychology and behavioural science combined with nearly 3 decades of proven experience. Thousands of incredible organisations trust us to level up their leaders, and potentially you will too. So please visit pragmaticthinking.com or check out the show notes below. Until next time, have a fantastic week.